Yeah, we're going to absolutely. We're staffing up, and we're going to reconcentrate them what that looks like post game, and then even like from an egress standpoint afterwards, it's going to look a little different because we would anticipate there's going to be less fans on the field, right? Given the policy, and so what does that look like as we're all leaving and heading to parking lots and Williamson Road, Centennial Road, and the pedestrian and vehicular circumstances. So there's also not only after triple zeros, what does that time look like, but the dominoes out that it's just going to be a different environment that we're responsible for all of that driveway to driveway.
You guys announced Clemson Ventures announced a jersey patch for the mascot with no fin health. I guess
that's right. Yeah.
For future sponsorship opportunities, maybe on the field or around Memorial Stadium, I guess, are you guys exploring those aspects as to gain more revenue in this house settlement area?
Yeah, Darian, great question, and we were proud to roll out the Novant partnership. And the unique strategy with the jersey patch, but albeit on a mascot. So, yes, the opportunities to generate revenues with the commercialization of that is part of Clemson Ventures strategy, but in a really thoughtful way. And we have Frank Howard Field, Memorial Stadium. So there are non-negotiables for how we go about it, but thoughtful and strategic partnership and sponsorships is certainly part of it and part of the auspice of Clemson Ventures. So we are having some conversations around that with some potential partners for as early as this fall for Memorial Stadium. There's been a partnership logo on the court in Little John. So these things aren't foreign to sports or even Clemson, but in a very measured, strategic way is how we're looking to go about it.
Is there any thought of phasing back in the collective?
We've certainly talked about it. We have to have optionality. Again, the 110 Society, which we had a transition within our collective environment over the couple of years. It was Tiger Impact, which served a really critical role. This is 4 and 3 years ago. Really critical role as we first started navigating the NIL landscape. That transition to 110 Society. Obviously, IPTAY was is stitched into some of that communication and strategy. And so, again, what we know now is that NIL, while still certainly in effect, is intended to look very differently. That's what the settlement and the guidance from CSC, et cetera, suggests. And so we are leaning into heavily what the intention and the regulations around that are, specifically through Clemson Ventures. Wow, back to your point, Larry, being nimble and what that looks like for our environment, commercial environment, collective environment, or otherwise, certainly would be on the table. We're not going to be caught flat-footed if that's a direction we need to transition to.
Talked about Clemson essentially adding another $26 million in anticipated expenses between rev share scholarships. I know that comes from a lot of different buckets, but in simplest terms, that $26 million is going to be funded from what?
Well, I'm really proud of how we've continued to adapt our business strategy. So I'll answer it in a couple ways, Chapel. One is the recognition that we certainly need to have as a department towards the changing landscape of higher education, right? And so President Clements, our board, and just the dynamic that is having to be managed from a campus, a faculty, the academy standpoint, research funding, right? There's a lot of moving parts there. And in the very simplest sense, our athletics department is an auxiliary unit of the university, albeit a very overt one and a very strategic and highly leveraged one. But I like to think small in that manner just to, again, recognize it's one of the things that I love most about my job in our industry is it's sports, but it's higher education, American higher education. So I love that. So my point is our respective, there's a lot of moving parts with the business of higher education. All that to be said, we've increased or raised revenues close to $40 million year over year from last year to this year, primarily driven by what our intended lift is from ACC distribution, success initiatives, the new viewership model that you all know about and we can talk about. That's a significant lift for us. Certainly some of these other revenue pieces that Darian's talked about with sponsorships, alcohol, sales and sponsorships is a significant part of that. As well, again, leaning into the Clemson Ventures strategy. Admittedly, our ticket price points and IPTAY memberships And that's one that incredibly sensitive on. That's a consumer-facing component where, ticket prices were increased in a very thoughtful, analytical manner, as were IPTAY membership levels, not something we take lightly. But I would tell you the response that our fans and IPTAY members have had towards that has been incredible, and we're sold out LSU game, anticipate to sell out the rest as we work through it. IPTAY membership levels have never been higher. So all of those little levers that we've pulled, and a lot of those are intra-athletics department, as far as how we're generating our own revenues and managing our business. And I know I've talked about and shared about how need to be thoughtful, and we are on expenses too, right? Back to the changing business model of college athletics. That means how we travel, what our rosters are, what the support for our teams are, while still having student athlete experience as the number one component. So I feel like it gets watered down a little bit. The changing business of college athletics, it's a really big catch-all, but there's a lot of really strategic things that we're pulling on both sides of the lever, revenues and expenses, in order to satisfy the new $26 million expenses, $26 million expense plus. That's really important for us.
When you announced Clemson Ventures, you said it could be a vehicle potentially for private equity. Like, how much have you actually looked into the possibility of that? What are the actual positives and negatives that you balance there?
Yeah, we have significantly, and there are really well read on what those opportunities are, and we're rather connected in that space. We haven't taken any next steps or any steps of significance as it relates to that external funding or private equity or private capital. Certainly, there's conferences and other schools that are having those type of conversations too. So what that looks like down the road, David asked 3 to 5 years. Gosh, I don't know, but I do feel really equipped that we're set to be strategic on what that could look like. I don't anticipate that at this point. We certainly haven't at this point. I think it's incumbent on us to, again, change the size of the coin, raise revenues, manage expenses. The need to be competitive has never been greater.
It's that time of year, everybody starts getting parking assignments and ticket assignments, and some people get a little mad. But how many parking spaces football losing because of the parking garage, the construction that's going on, and the next year or two could be a little tight in spots.
Do
right?
you guys get mad? Did Ross and Jeff roll out like press box seat assignments? Is that a thing? Do you guys have to? Okay. Game by game. Yeah, we're great. Yeah. Well, we don't part game by game. We part season by season. I don't have a hard count for you, David. It is that time of year, to your point. Parking garage, build, under construction, lot. Certainly this year over year, we have less parking spots. Certainly even more proximate parking spots, admittedly. That being said, I'll speak to where the strategy and a lot of the discussion are. We do anticipate a year from now to have a lot of access and really great parking around, I call it the green space, which is just, I guess, east between Motor Pool, Johnstone, Demolition, Core Campus. So really just on the other side of Scroll of Honor, if you guys are mind's eyeing with me. And so that's going to be significant amount of new spaces, really proximate, green space, so like not just a hard surface lot. So that's a year away. So while there was continued reduction of spots this year with construction, that's going to be a big one that we're going to roll out this upcoming off season. Obviously, the parking garage coming online, I think that's 2027, so still a couple years away. That's going to add inventory. It's different inventory. Parking deck is different than most of our fans are used to with tailgating, but there's going to be there's certainly appetite for that. But the development of campus proper, it's athletically or otherwise part of what we got to manage. Lastly, and I'm just going to use the facility question as an offshoot. Trustees have rolled out over the past couple meetings the plans for the Clemson Health Center, which there is some construction that started on that up Perimeter Road, really across from Botanical Gardens. That's going to be a huge, huge project for campus. And for our community, there's going to be some community access to it, is my understanding, and certainly the support for students and student athlete and performance components in there too. So I'm not co-opting into that project, but that's a huge initiative for the institution, for President Clements and the board, that has some parking effect, which is why I'm talking to it, but excited for that to be rolled out more for our community over the coming couple of years.
So Derby, the renovation is done. You've got gymnastics and lacrosse take care. What is next for athletics in terms of new or redoing things?
These feel like really traditional like facilities, great. Let's talk on that. The Watt Family Performance and Wellness Center, huge high impact project. I actually got to run in there during lunch while it was raining today. High impact strength and conditioning, sports med, nutrition for all of our student athletes, really all of our Olympic sports, really day to day. We're under construction. You've seen the expansion and renovation of Little John Coliseum, Swan Pavilion, catty corner to IPTE over there. So that'll be under construction for the next 16 months or so, kind of phased in and out of basketball season. Huge next step for our basketball programs, both men and women, donor supported there. So all that to be said, you've seen those and those are completed. The best answer, or the most interesting answer to your question is we're going to pick the pencil back up and do some feasibility study at Memorial Stadium. There's a lot of need there at the stadium. Certainly we've had investments over the years with premium seating and video board, scoreboard lights, right? And so there's certainly opportunity and demand for additional premium seating. What does that look like on the east side of the stadium? We've done different studies on that over the years, but want to really look at what that could look like for premium space, suites, clubs, certainly different demographics of premium area at our stadium. But then also that touches the entire stadium is infrastructure, right? Concourse, restroom, concessions, alcohol sales we've talked about as Chapel asked, and so those points of sale, that's where I think the infrastructure, Wi-Fi, so that type of infrastructure is the best way to say it, is I'm excited for that type of investment and how that would pair with premium seating, with the ROI with that. I love that type of presentation of investment for Memorial Stadium, stuff that affects all 80,000 plus, and then also that has premium and some ROI to it. So we haven't really restarted that, but that's coming here this fall, David. I don't have a timeline or an order of magnitude of that. It's feasibility study in nature, but that would be our big focal point of what would be a next big project ahead.
Baseball moved the bullpen. Fans can stand around down there. Is there any thoughts on redesigning that after a year, or just leaving it as it is for now?
Yeah, from the the bullpen aspect area, that'll be fine. We need to manage the environment down there better and still have a very safe and appropriate environment for our visitors and the visiting bullpen, but also still have a great environment as a home team. So there's a balance there that I think we need to we can thread that needle a little better than what we were this past year. But I'm excited about what that did for Kingsmore Stadium. We haven't really dug into that yet, but we will come for Kingsmore for 26.
You guys are still figuring out how it's all going to work with this new model and revenue sharing and all that, but Danny White, for instance, has been very vocal about collective bargaining. I mean, do you think are you at all in that same camp in terms of a need for that, in terms of having rules and things really in place, or do you feel good about where things are now?
Yeah, continued development needs to happen. The collective bargaining, employment, federal legislation, that all kind of gets tied together. I do think there needs to be continued development there. The support of student athletes and empowerment, and call it structure, I think it's taken really good steps with House case settlement and how that's continued to evolve. At the end of the day, I think that the structure piece I was kind of getting at with Larry's question earlier, where there's just some real certainty around what our operations are. Not guardrails. Certainty meaning, okay, it's in a better spot as from a legal standpoint, sure, from a political standpoint, so to speak. So if that answer is collective bargaining, if that means employment, if that means federal legislation or some combination of that, I think the optionality that exists is significant. We're still, again, it's been 5 weeks since the House case was settled and is being implemented. Am really intrigued and appreciative by the actions out of D.C., certainly the SCORE Act out of the House, Congress on the House side, and then the executive order from the president, I think are just indicative of the importance of college athletics, college sports in our country, in our society. And so what that path is, there's a lot of different angles to take with it. I think the activity and the support from D.C. Certainly speaks to the importance of continued change of college athletics to get to a point where there's just more structure that's more certain, not necessarily guardrailed or limited, so to speak.
In terms of the playoff, I think ACCs for the 5+11 model. Is that something you endorse? I mean, is there a want for that to be the model if it expands?
It's nice to have a head coach that's just like, hey, I'll play whatever, 2, 4, So Dabo and I certainly talk about it a lot. Commissioner Phelps has done a great job of kind of guiding that conversation, not only within the ACC room, but also with the other 3 Power 4 commissioners. Certainly the 5+11, I think, gives great access. Certainly an expansion to 16. There's pros and cons with that, but I think that is really intriguing from a college football standpoint. Certainly the 5 respects the conference champion. That attribute, I think, is even more fleeting and compelling. John, I think that would endorse. I don't know if endorse is the right word, but certainly supportive of that model. It's also indicative of, and we've talked a lot. You've seen actions from us with our scheduling and our Notre Dame partnership that we are building to be really adaptable for what different models or structure looks like, whether that's 5-11, other CFP formats, the value of strength of schedule, which certainly gets a lot of discussion these days, which I'm incredibly supportive of. We've been consistent in our scheduling model for years and playing at least 10 Power 5, whatever the vernacular at the time may be, BCS, Power 5, Power 4 schools. And we're scheduled out like that, but we're even actually scheduled beyond that, as you guys know, with our Notre Dame series, in order to have adaptability around what the ACC schedule looks like, what other conference schedules look like, what CFP format looks like, the value, I think the increasing value of what strength of schedule looks like. Again, our strategy has been built to be optionality on that, knowing that we don't control all those decisions, but really supportive of a lot of the progress that's being made from a CFP standpoint or otherwise.
Since we talked to you in April, there's been some additional information about Amy Smith via FOIA request. What's come out, some allegations that parents have made of verbal mental abuse. It's kind of a big picture question, but just looking back at that whole situation, was it a mistake to hire her? Do you regret that, given how things played out?
I think that the prominence that Clemson Gymnastics has shown in the 3 years, 3+ years that we've had the program, has been incredible. And we've seen that with the 2 seasons that we've competed, with the brand that Clemson Gymnastics is nationally. We value the student-athlete experience in all of our sports is a non-negotiable. So certainly followed protocol and worked through the transition with Amy, which was difficult and unfortunate. Maybe the best way I'll answer your question. All that to be said, couldn't be more excited about the hire of Justin and Liz, the Howells, and for Clemson to attract coaches of that caliber. They finished second in the country. Their resume is significant. Their fit within the rest of our head coaching room, so to speak, is something that I leaned heavy on them as we were recruiting. And I just think they fold in well to the caliber of head coaches that we have, and that was compelling on both sides. So I think it's just a testament to the next era for Clemson Gymnastics, that we've arrived, let alone that our expectations are even higher, particularly with Justin and Liz being here.
Coach Babbage kind of mentioned, I guess, expanding like real estate beyond Doug Kingsmore Stadium, maybe building like some retail, some restaurant shops like that. Do you think those ideas are feasible for Clemson, and if why or why not?
Yeah, things like that. It's a good question, Darian. And a little bit to John referenced a kind of PE, private equity type question. I think there are things. I don't mean to marry those 2 points, but there are aspirational things that we think and talk about here of what like long term looks like. What is the next? David asked 3 to 5 years. What is the next 5 to 10 or 15? And I don't mean to be so long term, but my point is those type of things. What is real estate? There's a lot of examples. Schools like us, they're doing real estate type developments. There's a lot that's being done within professional sports entertainment. Those type of districts, how that fits within a community, like I'm really intrigued by. Admittedly, we haven't done much work on that type of development, whether that's some of the stuff that Coach Backett just talked about or other type of developments that we see around the country. But it's on the list, so to speak, to really to look to explore and what the next steps look like. And the reason I linked it back to some of John's questions was around Clemson Ventures. Clemson Ventures is structured to be a vehicle that can operate and do things in a different manner, commercial, kind of more private type business, revenue generating in nature. So Yes, intrigued by that. Admittedly, while we've done and are well read on a lot of other kind of bigger picture topics, that's probably one we haven't really started to dive into yet. But I think that's something that's down the road could be really intriguing, and how that fits within our community and for our campus is, I don't know, it's intriguing.
A lawsuit was put in against the ACC. Part of it was that it had chilled, kind of the approach from the ACC had chilled your ability to get offers from other conferences. So how do you guys approach that now? I mean, are you open and kind of canvassing for offers from other conferences, or how do you actually approach that now that you're no longer chilled and that way you have a clear out?
It's chilled. That's a good verb there. Yeah, a couple things on the ACC settlement member disputes. The objectives, or maybe the reasons why that was initially filed, and therefore our objectives that we were really pleased with to move forward with the settlement were, John, to your point, certainty around our future media rights. And so while that was uncertain before, your point, now there is certainty on what that looks like for future media rights ownership. That was primary one, just have certainty on what that looks like, given our anticipation and our preparedness for the dynamic nature of college athletics in the years to come. So that's real direct. That being said, in addition, objectively, financial position changing, and with ACC success initiatives, the new viewership model, the innovative nature of that Commissioner Phillips has led through, certainly something that we feel like is going to have big upside for Clemson, not just because we're Clemson, but because we have to go earn it and continue to perform on the field and be a compelling brand and drive viewership, et cetera, consider different scheduling strategies. All these things are interrelated. So very pleased with the outcomes of meeting our objectives of the future certainty around our media rights and current financial position. And all that to be said, continue to lean in hard to the ACC. I've said a couple times now, but I love the phrase. I've said it a lot more internally. A strong ACC is good for Clemson, and a strong Clemson is good for the ACC. And I don't mean that to be rote. Like when I think about that, like really mean that resonates. Wow, for us to be great members of the conference we're in. Also something I know I've said for a while, and it's been really intentional, and I'm incredibly proud of how we've handled our business, so to speak. And that goes at all levels within the athletics department, our university leadership, and that's important, and it resonates not only within the tough circumstances of being in litigation, but also currently and as we go forward. And so the landscape's going to continue to change. Yes, we are positioned to be nimble with that, while also needing to be great members and partners with the schools that we compete against within a conference, let alone our national expectations that we have, certainly in football, let alone across the board.
Does the federal government stepping in give you any concern? Are you afraid that your voice is not going to be heard, that there will be a certain number of people, bigger schools and all being heard, and you're being shut out? And how do you fight that?
Yeah, it doesn't give me concern. I guess I'll go back to, it's indicative of the importance of college athletics and the uncertain nature of the current construct. And so, again, Congress, Oval Office, I think I welcome that type of activity. We certainly engage in partnership across campus, myself, colleagues in Columbia or otherwise, like how we work locally, within our state legislature and General Assembly, let alone federally, your question. So I welcome it. It doesn't concern, but it certainly is complicated, and there's a lot of different aspects to that. And so exactly where the outcomes come, so I don't mean to be so optionality, and when I talk about collective bargaining versus employment versus federal legislation, it's really complex. College sports has grown to be incredibly complex, and so therefore the involvement of federal government, so to speak, may help simplify or give more structure to it. And so welcome that if that is potentially some outcomes from that.
Another thing Pavo said a lot is that this is all just going to be a giant super league at some point in football anyway. So with the uncertainty of what the model's even going to look like, does that chill the idea of moving to another conference or where you have to be? I mean, you have to figure out what it's going to be in general in terms of football and basketball, but that's all plays.
Yeah, the broad. Coach and I've heard his it's all gonna blow up, right? Holy cow! Or it's all gonna be one big. So listen, obviously it's my job to be much more the practitioner as far as how that could come to form. There is a lot of discussion in groups and sidebars nationally as it relates to even broader picture. How does it look for the separation, so to speak, or the delineation between football, which for most schools is your significant primary revenue driver, versus the other, the 21 sports that we have here that don't drive as much revenue. And so, that's the beauty of college athletics, that the aspect that we have 2 or 3 that are revenue producers, but we have 21, business units. So all that to be said, John, the dialogue and activity around national type structures really connected on and well read on. And there's a lot of intriguing aspects to that, while recognizing current structure, conference membership, ACC for us, and the positives that come from that. So does it affect the broader picture? Absolutely. Do we hedge, or do you have to try to plot things out and decision tree and scenario things out? Absolutely. Anybody that tells you exactly how it's going to go is lying. But back to the optionality for us and being well read and connected is part of the game, and those type of things that you reference are all very live and active right now.
Do you see 2030 as a possible inflection point, just because a lot of TV contracts, and then that's when the buyout drop off is? Obviously anything can happen, but is that a time to maybe look at?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of logic to that, Chapel, for the reasons you ticked off. But I can't admit that there's a circle or anything on that. I think there's some naturality to that sure makes a lot of sense, but that's certainly not necessarily the mindset leading up to or even beyond that. Again, we're going to be great members of the conference we're in. I was actually thinking about this, and Jeff, I meant to talk to you earlier. Within the last 2 years, we've won 7 ACC championships, 7 different sports, meaning 7 different head coaches have won ACC championships of our 16 head coaches, so about half. So my point is, I'm not going to go down the competitive path other than to say, hey, we still have to be great within the ACC, which is an incredibly strong conference across the board, while still having national expectations across the board. And there's all kinds of different ways we can go about it within the ACC.
I think you wrote to fans back, last month about scrutinizing expenses in your letter to the fans. I guess, what does that kind of look like for the athletic department when you're trying to reduce those costs while you're also trying to gain revenue at the same time? Yeah,
Darian, it's it's hard, and there's a lot of different, because we're all creatures of habit, and certainly, holy cow, coaches are that to a T. And, so how you and it's always more, and we want to invest more and grow and growth mindset and continue to have higher and higher expectations on the field and off, support of our student athletes, while the game's changing. And so, how we travel, where we travel, how we schedule, administrative staff and support. I mean, admittedly, there's a lot of unfilled positions that we have administratively. I know we have some staff in the room, and a lot of us feel the brunt of that we have more and higher expectations of things we do and support we give and environment and experiences that we put on, while we need to manage the expenses and try to tighten the belt, so to speak. And so I don't mean to be so quaint as far as some of those business references, but we significantly look at how we deliver administrative support, what our student athletes need primarily, and then where there's efficiencies within the department, within campus, and how we deploy that. So while we are proud and have been so focused on revenue generation, that expense management is significant. And again, this gets back to we are no different and need to be a great part of the university. And there's a lot of that type of efficiency and lens from a higher ed standpoint. And so we need to do our part with that as well.
I got a question on the numbers. So you said you had how many on scholarship now for next 275, 225?
We've had approximately 275 scholarships, and we're adding 150 going to 425.
Mm-hmm. Number of athletes you have of all the teams.
We've had last academic year, we had 592 student athletes, 21 sports, 16 head coaches, and about 275 scholarships, all supported by IPTE. This upcoming academic year, approximately 425 scholarships. That's the plus 150. Our roster numbers, instead of 592, we anticipate to be right around 550.